Okay, I think it's recording. All right.
It's recording.
All right, folks, welcome to our next session where we'll be talking to Dr. Nicole Cook. She'll be unpacking extracurricular activities for us, and we'll be talking about why being your best self also makes you the best college applicant. In this interview, Dr. Cook will discuss common questions that she hears in her practice about extracurricular activities and how to break out, what do colleges really want to see mindset. And she'll talk about how students can find their passions and actually enjoy their lives while still preparing to be highly qualified applicants for college. So with that, Dr. Good, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So I'll begin by asking you if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, the type of students and families, et cetera, that you work with, how you typically engage with them, and how you see your process unfolding at your end.
Sure. So I've been a career admissions professional. So I started my career working in admissions at Vanderbilt University as an admissions officer. That was my alma mater. And there I worked in a highly selective admissions process and got to see sort of the ins and outs of how it all goes down. From there, I decided I wanted to work with families. And since that time, I've worked in a couple of different schools and currently have a private practice where I collaborate with students and families to work through the college process. So this involves everything from choosing the school, which is what most people think of, to writing the essays, making a resume or a list of extracurricular activities, choosing summer activities or programs, choosing teacher letter of recommendations, and then also working with families as they determine cost and value that are appropriate for their family, for their value set. And then my latest project is an online startup where we are hoping to bring a little bit more information to families across the U.S. And so we've created an online course through the Find the Right College program. And we'll be launching that this fall.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So, Dr. Cook, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that, as a parent of a high school student myself, and most of our audience here are kind of in the same boat. We always kind of scratch our heads around navigating the application process and typically around, these extracurricular activities. So, most of my questions are going to be around, how do you really approach creating a great set of extracurriculars? What type of activities and qualities colleges typically want to see in an applicant, and essentially how we go about prioritizing and making choices about what we do with our children's free time. So, if with that, I guess the first question that occurs is, why should students even be doing extracurricular activities? What's the point?
That's a great question. So on my end, I often see a lot of families come in and talking about extracurriculars, but people fail to sort of start at the beginning, right? Of why did people ever do extracurricular activities to start with before it became just to get into college? And I think we've certainly seen a big uptick in that in recent years, and people feeling like there's one reason to do them, and it's for your college resume. But there are actually some other great benefits to extracurriculars, and I think it's a good idea to start the conversation here about what you're doing. So one thing to remember is that college is the next step, but it's an adult step, right? So that when a student goes to college, they are, in America, they're becoming an adult. And that's sort of our transition from childhood to adulthood at that time. And so the high school years are very critical years of development for a student. They are often the years where you determine your extracurricular interests in terms of hobbies. And as many of us adults know, hobbies sometimes become jobs, right? And so a hobby might be more impactful in your career than what you take in school in some cases. You're also developing key adult skills such as having responsibilities, learning to work with people, learning to take risks, and learning to be a little bit surprised. So you might try out debate club because you're supposed to for college, or your mom made you or whatever, but then you might actually find that even though at first you were intimidated, you're a very good debater. And, in the teenage years, it is really where students begin to create an identity about who they are, to figure out what they're good at. And if you're not doing stuff outside the classroom, you aren't really doing any of that learning. So getting out in your free time, getting out of the classroom to try some stuff, take on some responsibilities, do some learning, meet some people, kind of gives you more information to work with as you head into the college time. I also will say that extracurricular activities can be really fun and really rewarding. And those things aren't particularly highly valued right now. And when we talk about college admissions, nobody's like, how much fun are you having? But it is important for students to let off steam and to have friends and to have fun. I mean, the students I work with who are the most successful applicants are often happy people. And so it's important to be excited about what you're doing after school a couple of days a week. Certainly when it comes to sports and athletics, getting those endorphins, having physical fitness can help you study better. It can help you focus better. It can also give you a sense of self-esteem or accomplishment in a way that sometimes your academic life won't give you. So there are a lot of benefits to extracurriculars just by themselves, when we don't look at what the resume does for college admissions. And I think it's worth it for families or students to kind of sit back and say, what do I value? Do I value having some physical fitness? Do I value trying new things? Do I value helping serve my community? And just kind of putting that into its place before you start doing what you think colleges want to see. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So I guess the next question that comes to mind is, there's a lot of debate about extracurricular activities and what type of activities students should typically choose. Is there really an activity that they should choose versus one that they really, really want to do or, perhaps might be passionate about? So could you please talk a little bit about how colleges review extracurricular activities and what they like to see in applicants?
Absolutely. And this is often one of the first questions that people have when we start talking. And it's not uncommon for a parent and a student to come to my office and the parent be saying, my student is not doing community service. I know they have to have it for a college application. And the student be saying, I don't, leave me alone, kind of stuff. When it comes to college admissions, there is simply no formula. And I cannot emphasize that enough. There is no checklist. So it's not like, and I wish I could, right? I wish I could give people a list and say, do these 6 things and you will get into these 6 colleges, right? It is a complicated, complex process of evaluation that admissions offices are doing. So that being said, you can't aim for the checklist. You can't aim to do a sport, community service, a musical instrument, and debate team, right? But what you can know is that colleges want students who are engaged in their community. So they want kids who are going to come to college and do stuff too, right? And so if you're just sitting at home playing video games, that's what you're going to do at college, they're assuming, right? And so they don't like applicants like that as much. They want you to be engaged in your community. So that could be your school community, that could be your city or town community where you're involved in service or civic leadership, things like that. They want students who are taking on responsibility. So students who are, we think of leadership as kind of a hot term, but I talk a lot about responsibility. So you may not be the president of an organization, but you might be the person, keeping the schedule, or the person responsible for bringing all the equipment to every game. And often when you have responsibility, you have learning, and you also are demonstrating that the adults who are working with you trust you. And those are important pieces too. And so obviously leadership, being a captain or being a president or things like that, demonstrates responsibility. But for students who feel frustrated that they're not getting an opportunity to be the president of something or a captain of something, I would encourage them to realize they can take on responsibility. And that can be a good way to kind of find another path for that quality. Colleges really want students who know how to live and play and work with other people and with other kinds of people. And so a lot of students will tend to kind of stick in their bubble, or they'll kind of stick to their certain things. And when it comes to college admissions, that's a very valued quality. And so looking for opportunities to, reach across a boundary, to try something different, to participate in something that's not in kind of your usual area of town or your usual area of interest. It doesn't just, show the colleges that you can live and work and play with people different from you, but it often generates some learning that they value hearing about too. And then, the kind of old standards in college admissions, consistency. So doing the same things and then doing that across time. And so it's much better to have been a part of certain things and kind of stuck with them, deepened your commitment to them, and done that, for 3 or 4 years in high school than it is to kind of do a bunch of stuff and kind of change around all the time. So I usually recommend in 9th and 10th grade trying as many things as you can. And that goes back to that idea of taking risks and stepping out of your comfort zone, but then settling in on 3 or 4, where a student can dive in, get those responsibilities, get some of that learning. And then often when you look at these qualities, so kind of community engagement, looking for responsibilities, trying to learn to work and play and live with others, trying to be consistent. Then as you look at your activities, sometimes the list looks a little different. It doesn't look so much like, oh, I've checked all the boxes, or I haven't checked all the boxes. You may have checked boxes that you didn't even really know you checked. And then there may be some other boxes that even though you're like, oh, I have a sport and I have a community service and I have whatever, you might not have checked some of those other things that I was talking about in terms of the learning and the qualities you're actually demonstrating. So.
Excellent. So in your years advising students and families, what's the most unusual extracurricular activity that somebody has participated in that you come across?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I have had students who, I actually know the answer. I had one this last year who took a blacksmithing course. And this was not something that he did per my recommendation either. It was not like we had dug in and I had, encouraged. I mean, it was like he came to me in 11th grade and he was already a blacksmith. So it was pretty interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. So let's talk about student resumes for a second. So why should a student make a resume, even early on in high school? And isn't that a little too early for a student to have a resume?
Yes. It is not too early to have a resume. It is unlikely that a freshman would do anything with it. Right. And so I would recommend making a resume as early as 9th grade. I would not recommend making it with the purpose to send it out somewhere. So essentially for an early high school student, your resume is a record keeping document. What I find frequently is that a student will start making their resume and they actually don't remember all of the things they did in 9th grade. And so they might have like played lacrosse for 1 year, or they might have, been in a random Spanish honor society that 1 year or something. And then as they've gotten more involved in other activities, they just sort of forget about that stuff. They also may have been, it's not uncommon, and especially in 9th grade, to still be involved in some kind of carryover activities from middle school that then kind of fade away. So the first thing you want to do is have an accurate record of your high school years. And that starts with keeping records in 9th grade. And then the other thing that's helpful about making a resume at any age is that you generate a little bit of purposeful thought around it. And so if a 9th or 10th grader kind of knows, hey, I want to go to college. I know colleges want me to do some activities. How am I going to get from where I am in 9th grade with a blank slate to where I want to be in 12th grade with a couple of leadership positions and 3 or 4 great activities that I'm enjoying, that are fun to me or teaching me something, and that I'll be proud to send off to colleges. And, if you start that conversation in 9th grade, then the journey is a little bit more purposeful. And I think for students, when they start 9th grade, and especially as they roll into 10th grade, college still feels very far away. And it is for them very far away. But those of us working with students that age know that it isn't so far away, right? That after 2 or 3 years, the record is really sort of set. By the time you get to 12th grade, they're isn't really that much you do that changes your resume drastically, right? You can't go and join 12 clubs in 12th grade and sort of change the narrative of your resume. So with resume is one of the things I like to talk with and work with families about very early, because if you set it up and do it purposefully and do it well, then by the time you get to the application process, it's just good. You don't really have to worry about it. You don't have to do anything about it. If you sort of neglect it and figure it'll work out and you'll deal with it later, it can become very stressful as you get to the later years. So I feel like you're trying to add in activities or trying to find leadership positions, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you could talk about a little bit about what goes into the construction of a resume. What are some of the sort of the primary areas that a student should talk about?
Sure.
How to essentially construct a resume that perhaps stands out or is eye-catching, or more than just a sort of a chronological
Sure.
list of things that they might have done.
So there are two components to this. One is sort of the physical creation of a resume, right? The paper or electronic document. And at the beginning of 9th and 10th grade, I would say a sort of list is fine, because for your purposes, it's a thought tool. It's a record keeping tool. Before you send it anywhere, obviously it needs to look a little bit better. So many resume formats work and can be fine. But the applications to college request a specific type of information from students. So when I have students making resumes, I usually will mimic that information. Colleges in particular ask, so if you do the common application, it asks for an activity, and then it asks how many hours per week and how many weeks per year do you do this activity. Mm-hmm. And so you would say, I'm the drum major. I do this, let's say 10 hours a week, and that's 12 weeks a year during football season or whatever. And that helps them know, hey, this is a substantial commitment. The student is doing this every day after school and on the weekends. And so I have students put that kind of information in to a resume, kind of how much actual time they're spending on average, in the activity, because it allows colleges to kind of parse through, is this a club they go to once a month that they're not really involved in, or is this a really substantial activity? And then I guess the other thing is, the other mistake I think a lot of students make is just to assume that people outside of their school community know what their school activities are. So I'll give an example. In the IB program, there's the CAS component of the IB program, which essentially amounts to some service and community hours that students have to do. So at a couple of schools I've worked with, they call them CAS groups, right? These are basically, and so students will put on their resume, CAS group, blah, blah, and I'm like, nobody outside of your school really knows what that is if you just say CAS group. But the working assumption from them is that, oh, well, of course it's a college. They know what CAS is, and so you have to really bring it down to, let's assume ignorance. Let's assume that the person reading my application is a 22-year-old straight out of college who did no extracurricular activities and, has never been to my state. Right. And that they need me to spell out every abbreviation. They need me to list out every function and goal of my club. And they need me to spell it out for them. Hey, being the president means this. Or doing this service day means this, right? And so just not operating on the assumption that they know what you're doing, but really giving a detailed picture of what it is you're doing. So I'll even have students, if they are on a sports team and they say, let's say they play soccer, and they list their position, I would even have them say position goalie and then list what the goalie does. That may sound a little silly, but it's just not leaving anything to chance, that you assume someone knows what a goalie is. And then it also fills out your resume. A lot of students feel like their resumes are kind of empty, or even if they do a lot of things, they list it down and they'll be like, this doesn't look like as much as I do, and so it allows you to kind of have the feeling that you're accurately portraying all of your information on the resume, that you get to kind of spell it out in detail. And then kind of like with professional resumes, if there's any quantifiable things or any accomplishments. All of that should be on there. And the other thing I see a lot is students leave things off that they think aren't important. You should never leave anything off. And so it should be everything from your high school record that you've ever done with your spare time. Activities that are structured and organized tend to read better and do better in the process. And so if students are taking guitar lessons or something like that, I usually will encourage them to try to either find a structured outlet for that or to combine it with, okay, well then volunteer to play guitar at the old folks home down the street one day a week, right? If all you do is sit around and play guitar, go play it for some people who might enjoy it. Because those kinds of activities tend to be more kind of provable and more quantifiable as opposed to the very unstructured, I play guitar in my room or I do art in my room or that kind of thing. And then the other piece of, okay, so on the resume also, I usually have my students list their accelerated classes. So if they're taking AP or IB classes, their test score breakdown, their GPA, and just a few of those pieces as a part of kind of their academic record to kind of start off the resume, because that really subs in place. On a professional resume, you put your education and your degrees and stuff like that. So for students, that's really their qualification, right? Is how many AP classes are you taking? What are they? And then some of my students will also write summary statements like, highly motivated STEM student, pursuing biomedical engineering degree or something like that. So you could, if a student was motivated and ambitious and really a go-getter, I sometimes would have them write those kind of summary statements as well. And then in terms of the resume standing out, once it's constructed well and has the right information on it, usually the students whose resumes sort of stand out are students who, as I mentioned before, demonstrate engagement, demonstrate philanthropy, ability to work with others, but also who have some level of vision. And that doesn't necessarily have to be to start a company, but, vision to see beyond their school, vision to see further in a subject matter, political or, vision for the world kind of things. Students who kind of have a big mind or a big heart are kind of looking ahead, looking out of themselves. Students who are innovators, students who are very beloved parts of their community, and then generally, students who are exceptional, who are, good athletes, who are, good debaters, all of those things can stand out in their own way. Musicians, artists, and different components of those, I would probably work with differently to help them stand out more, right? So if you're an artist, I would probably be encouraging you to use any possible supplementary space to exhibit your art. And so making sure your artwork was up on a website that the admissions officers could easily click to, or making sure that you've submitted something they can see, as a part of their, if they have a blank submission space, or showing it to an admissions officer if you have an interview. So there are different ways that different things would stand out on your resume, and you might work with them a little bit differently. But I think that's kind of, put it together well, make sure the right information is on there, and then really try to play up the ways in which you feel like you're distinguished. A lot of students talk about being unique. And I think the fight to be unique is very real in students' minds. And I often use the analogy of there's a book I read when I had my first child about a mother having her first child, right? And this book was very powerful, but it was a very common experience for women who have children. And, it's probably one of the only other things I've seen that reminds me of kind of what I do in the college process, because I was very moved by the book I read as a new mother. But it wasn't unique at all, right? I mean, it was a very common human experience. And, students in high school are going through some common human experiences. They're growing up, they're becoming independent, they're learning about themselves, they're learning about the world. And, the best resumes and essays I see every year don't necessarily have things on them that are different. Some of them do, and those stand out, and that's why you hear about them in the news, and that's why everybody wants to be them, right? But a lot of the great students are great, hardworking, good people who are using their time to give to others, to develop their minds, to be an active part of their communities. So, I say that to say your resume should be focused on what makes you distinguished, what makes you the best you, and not what makes you different or better than others. That makes sense.
So, having said that, is there, can you recommend to parents sort of a starting point or a template perhaps that might be available somewhere on the web, or something that you might provide, where folks can look at it? This is the task in front of them. This is what the document looks like. These are the sections I need to sort of fill. So students that are perhaps in 9th grade or 10th grade can start thinking holistically about their academic career at school and how best to present themselves to colleges. And then at the same time, kind of go about identifying their interests along the way. So is there some sort of is there some sort of a template kind of an approach that can be a good starting point at least?
There is. So I don't know of a free one anywhere on the web. Admissions officers sometimes can have suggestions, but so for my clients, I wrote one and had a professional resume writer refine it for me. And then we also provide one in the program that we're currently launching, the Find the Right Program College. So I believe pretty strongly that being able to fill in a sharp, good-looking resume is a big part of the college admissions process. And so we've provided that as a part of our course materials, so people would just download and fill it in. Yeah.
Excellent. So you talked about communicating extracurriculars in a resume type format at the application point itself. Are there other avenues or other points in time along a student's high school career where they might sort of preeminently reach out to sort of colleges that are on their list to communicate some of the things that they're doing in advance of putting the application out?
That varies by college, right? Some colleges don't have the time or don't want to take the time. And there are a variety of things going on in college admissions. There's an application system called the Coalition application, which is aiming to do some of this, right? To have students have a receptacle, basically a portal where they can keep some things that currently is not communicating, but may eventually communicate with colleges in this way. Some colleges have a recruitment staff that's very interested in knowing this stuff very, very early on. So, it kind of depends on the college. I think if you have a resume together or you have some kind of award or accomplishment, and you do want to communicate it with the college, finding out who your representative is for your state or city, making sure that you're talking to the right person. And then if you're trying to communicate something like this, you don't necessarily have to ask them a question. So you don't necessarily even need to get a response, right? But just to say, your college is top of my list. I thought I wanted to send you guys this because I'm very proud of it. And I just wanted to let you know you'll have my application in the fall. And so that's kind of the approach I'm encouraging my students now to take, with some exceptional activities or awards that they've been given, where you will see students using their activities or their resume earlier in high school is often for summer programs. So there are some very competitive and very selective summer programs that are highly academic or highly leadership based. And so those activities in your resume will come into play, as early as summer after 9th or 10th grade when you're applying for those kinds of things. Okay. Does that answer the whole question?
It does. Thank you. So, I guess the next question is, any parent with high school student knows that there's a massive time crunch that these kids are in. So how best should they be organizing their time? How should they be thinking about their spare time? What are the most important things that they ought to keep in mind as they're thinking about their extracurriculars?
Yeah. So one of the things that conversations I have with my students and families a lot is, as but you're under a lot of pressure, right, to not know or to fight back against it. Time is a very finite resource, and there's only so much of this and other resources to go around. And I think that the current model is just to squeeze, and it's kind of an addition model, and people sort of don't realize or don't think or just kind of ignore the fact that it's also a subtraction model. So, if you take the SAT again, for example, which is a conversation I was having with a family this week, it's not just adding on the SAT again, it's taking away the Saturday to study for the APUS exam, which the student had the following Monday. And so that's so the first thing to remember is that as you add in more and more things, you're also taking away the opportunity to either enrich or deepen the things you are doing, or to study. And grades are always the most important part of any college application. While extracurriculars can be a huge part and often are a big distinguishing part, if you don't have the grades, you aren't in the door. And so the extracurriculars don't matter.
Right.
And so the grades and the course choices along with that, so taking a rigorous, challenging curriculum for the student, making the best grades possible, and that curriculum should always kind of be first at the top of the list. And then thinking about, okay, what I would say, this is a conversation I have with students and would encourage parents to have with their students is, okay, what are you interested in? What skills do you have? What do you want to learn about or get skills in? And what clubs are good at your school, right? So is a debate club awesome at your school? And then let's pick a couple of things that you're willing to try. And so take a couple of those risks, go to a couple of meetings, or try a couple of, flute lessons, or try the swim team for a few weeks. I mean, nothing is in stone. I mean, there's so much pressure around everything, but there's no reason you can't try a couple of meetings or try a season. I mean, the pressure from the coaches and I hear it a lot. When I was an active school counselor, I often would, go to a coach and say, look, I know they need to be at every practice. I'm not devaluing the value of basketball or whatever sport it was, but look, can we just talk for a minute? I would sort of go and negotiate on the students' behalf so that they could have the Friday afternoon off to study or whatever it was they needed. But, so everybody's going to tell you that their thing is the most important thing, but it's not. You're the most important thing. And you get to make the decision about, yes, I want to do whatever sport, but, I don't want to do it at the level this coach is encouraging me to do it. So I'm just going to kind of do my thing. And if it means I have to sit out one game, I do, right? I'm not trying to suggest that students skimp on activities. I'm just trying to say, just be reasonable about it all, right? What can you do? What makes sense for you to try? Take a couple of risks, try a couple of new things, and then, really look for those places that you can kind of dig in for a couple of years. If athletics is your thing, great. If music is your thing, if art is your thing, if service is your thing, it doesn't really matter which one it is, but it should be a thing that you don't dread going to, that your mom's not making you go to, or your college counselor's not making you go to. It should be something that you enjoy at least a little bit, or at least see the value of, right? The skills you're gaining from it. Does that
It does. It's actually a perfect segue into the next question, which is, there seems to be sort of this massive amount of obsession around extracurriculars, around building these sort of perfect models, for colleges to review. But outside of the college question, there's got to be other benefits that students can derive out of extracurricular activities besides just having to put them on your resume for colleges. So if you could talk about that for a bit, how do we build excellent students and excellent people, as opposed to just excellent college candidates?
Yes, and we started with a little bit of this at the beginning. I think it's good to kind of come back to this as we near the end too, just to think about, and there are a lot of, I work with a lot of students who are great examples of this, right? Especially, as I'm sure you're familiar, in sort of the IT world or the, software development world. I have a lot of students who, what's on their extracurricular time, what's in their hobbies, will probably be the most important thing that drives them through to the next level of career, right? Because they're not getting from their schools the level of, coding work or entrepreneurial ideas, or stuff like that. So they have little businesses, or, I have a student who has a little IT tech support business, and, that's his sort of hobby or job. And that's laying the foundation for what he'll do with the rest of his life. So there's a little bit of that. And I think it's fine if you're a student for whom what you're doing outside the classroom is is kind of your thing, and we should celebrate that and embrace that. You still have to have the grades, right? You still have to go to college to get the bachelor's degree that you need to work and get the money you want, but you can kind of just enjoy that piece of it. For other students, I think thinking about these issues of growing up. So like, how do I learn to take on a responsibility, complete it, and demonstrate that I have qualities that, will function in the adult world. Like, I can complete a task. I have responsibility. I know how to communicate with other people and with adults. I know how to function as a part of a team. I know how to show up when I've made a commitment. I know how to think outside the box or think creatively or go problem solve when there's a problem that I don't know how to attack. A lot of these are skills that students learn both inside and outside the classroom, but often in an impactful way outside the classroom. I did part of my dissertation research was on a college access program, and it's really changed my life and the way I think about students, because I did a series of interviews with the students who were involved in this program, and they took the most away from this hiking experience that they did, where they learned to kind of surmount obstacles, and they came back and kind of processed them and talked about it as it might apply to their academic career. But, in the teenage years, this kind of experiential learning, like going to hike a mountain or going to state in, tennis or basketball, or, taking your marching band to the Rose Bowl or whatever it might be, these kinds of experiences help us learn in different ways, and we carry them with us through our whole lives.
Right.
And so resilience, problem solving, teamwork, commitment, responsibility, those are such valuable qualities to learn. And there's a great article about the value of having a summer job in high school that a colleague sent me a while back. And it was just like, hey, these are real life skills. Like, you got to learn to show up. You have to learn to kind of learn what the real world is like a little bit, a little bit of that. So all of these are great learning opportunities. So even if I weren't coaching for, highly selective college applications, I would still be coaching for students to be involved, to be out there in the world, to be learning stuff. And then the other thing I see very distinctly in my practice is that students who are more involved outside the classroom, they write better essays and they interview better. Because they have more experiences to talk about. And again, I can't really draw much correlation between the type of activity. I can show you an artist and a golf player and a, musician and, a coder. There are all kinds of different students doing different things who stand out in different ways, but they are engaged, right? And so when they go to write an essay on one of the now many supplemental application essay topics, they have stuff to write about. And then when they get an interview, they have more practice, interacting in different settings. They have more experiences to talk about and draw upon when they're asked about, talk about a time you had a challenge, or talk about an area of your strength, or things like that. So I see a lot of kind of intangible qualitative add-in to the application process from students who are very involved outside the classroom.
Excellent. Well, I am very curious about, we touched a little bit about this kind of a resume template, and you had alluded to a program that you have. If you wouldn't mind sort of giving some, kind of high-level parting thoughts to our audience, and also kind of tell folks on how they might be able to get their hands on such template and other kind of services, et cetera, that you might offer. I know a little bit about it, but would love for you to talk about it as well.
Sure. So we're really excited to be launching the Find the Right College program. And essentially the program came when myself and a partner just decided that families are looking for information about college. And, I'm full. I mean, I could see twice as many students as I see now in terms of demand. All the good people I know are full. There's a lot of demand for information, but when you really go out and try to find it yourself, it's pretty overwhelming, and it can feel hard to know which information to trust and what to do first. And so I wrote a course, and the program is walking students step by step and families through the college admissions process, kind of A to Z, to make sure you know everything from the terminology you need to know, and then all the way through giving you the tools that help you in the process, such as the resume template, application organizer, an essay writing kind of tool that you shortcut your way through kind of a process of 1, 2, 3 steps, financial aid and scholarships, all of that. So this program is basically about to be released. So we should be up and running this summer, and definitely in the fall we'll kind of be going full blast. And then we have within the program a forum where families can ask questions for our expert advisors. Obviously, I'll be one of those. And then kind of doing monthly webinars and some things like that. And so we're just hoping to become kind of a trusted guide for families as they look for good information and as they try to figure out where to start and which steps to take when through the process, kind of hoping to guide everybody through. And, one of my personal goals is that we just take the stress levels down a little bit, that people feel like they know what they're doing and they have a plan. We got to push back against the hype just a little so that everybody can be a little happier and enjoy their time with their kids a little bit more, as I see so many families, and I'll sometimes stop and say, hey, this is it. Like, this is the last year you're at home, and college stuff is important, but so is other stuff too, right? And so why don't you go home and have dinner with your family tonight and put this stuff away? That stuff is very important. And so we're just hoping to be a part of making some of those changes happen in the current climate, which generally seems full of stress, always, everywhere. So
definitely. So we'll get information from you on how folks can access that program and share it along when the time is right. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking time out today and chatting with me about extracurriculars and the college process. Very enlightening conversation.
Great. Thank you. And our website is up and running, www.findtherightcollege.com. And I'm available through there. We do some individual counseling. So we certainly are happy to see people, doing one-on-one, but we hope people take advantage of our blog, our resources, any ways that we can help, even without paying, right? To just have some good information. And I love the Capiche project and idea, and we're very excited to be a partner and be a part of it. So I wish everybody well on the grand journey of making your way through high school, surviving and thriving through that journey. And thank you for having me as a guest.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Cook.
Great.
Okay.